Lisa. How cool is this? Our second video together. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited. This is going to be awesome.
I loved our first video, and it really gives us a chance to show our viewers that, hey, here are two very different people that have different ideas, but yet see things very similarly. But
yeah, I believe we share passion.
but before we start, a quick shout out. Where Lisa and I are doing a webinar on February 13th, Banishing Fear and Finding Courage to Heal from Codependency. And it's going to be a great Valentine's Day gift because we're talking about self-love. And how could you love someone else without self-love?
You can't love anyone unless you love yourself. It sounds so cliche, but all love starts with self-love. And you can't attract anyone who loves you until you love yourself. You just can't.
But today, we're talking about disassociation and how that affects codependency recovery. What would you like to say about today's topic?
I think it's a very important topic because I don't think most people who are codependent understand how often they probably disassociate and why they disassociated as children and how that's affecting their recovery today. So I think and I don't think, in my opinion, a lot of therapists understand how disassociation comes into play with codependence. So I think it's really, really important.
The most important part of codependency recovery, at least I believe, is the acknowledgement that to survive, either as a child or as an adult, we had to turn off our feelings, we had to disconnect from our memories and our feelings in order to stay sane. And then I say that paradoxically because the codependent who remembers everything that happened badly to them is one that walks around with a lot of pain and suffering. But to tell them about the codependent who can disassociate, what's their life like? What's their life story?
Well, I relate it to my own experience. I disassociated, in my opinion, to escape the pain of not feeling loved and not feeling like I belonged. The tribal instinct was completely frustrated. I felt rejected and like I was in the way all the time. And so what I would do as a little girl is I would disassociate from my feelings completely. Right. I walked around very numb, and people would say, "Oh, she had a chip on her shoulder." And it's because I had this tough exterior that I think was trying to protect me from what was going on inside of me. But yeah, and as an adult, you're not connected to how you feel. And you end up worrying about how everyone else feels. And it's so much easier for you to know how your spouse feels or how your kid feels or how your mother feels than it is to know how you feel.
But I'm going to add, it's not only easier, it's safer because we recovering codependents and codependents in general, we learned that if we should recognize the unfairness, the harm, the abuse, and the neglect that we are experiencing if we recognize it, we'll get mad. If we get mad, we communicate that either verbally or non-verbally, like you did with your chip on your shoulder. And then when our narcissistic parent or our narcissistic loved ones see that, they punish us. They punish us for being upset at what they did. So we have two choices, to verbalize that or shut it down. And that's where the disassociation, the disconnection from the feelings and the memories actually, ironically, helps the codependent survive, either as a child or as an adult.
Yeah. You probably know better than I do, but I associate it with the pain versus pleasure principle. That the brain associates pain with expressing how you feel. Right. And pleasure with shutting down. And so to me, it's like a survival skill that goes rogue. It's just not safe to feel.
Exactly.
It's not safe.
And you're hitting upon classical conditioning, or some people call Pavlovian conditioning, where you learned that if you should remember your pain, you experience what anxiety or cognitive dissonance, and your brain works to protect you from that, so it disconnects you from it, so you don't experience the turmoil inside. And so there's a conditioning that if you remember pain, you're conditioned to shut it off.
Yeah.
It's like a circuit breaker or an on and off switch.
Yeah, and we, as adult codependents, we don't realize that we're living that out day in and day out. We're living that out day in and day out. We don't even realize it.
How many times have you seen a codependent start to tell their feelings and observe them around a narcissist, and then they're cut off, and then bam, their face goes blank, or they speak?
Absolutely, all the time.
It's sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. Or I have clients who will tell me a horrific story and they're laughing about it.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Disconnected, and I feel like it's my job to bring them back and have an emotional response to it to help them understand that that's the way they're skating over what happened.
Exactly. That's a great example. In fact, it reminded me of a client of mine who, when she would cry, and it was a most bizarre experience. As she was crying, her facial muscles went into a smile. It was a contortion, and I get goosebumps just thinking about it because
me too, right now.
Because she was so conditioned to not experience anger and anger that her face went into a smile as she is like emoting pain.
Well, I have one woman whose father was a preacher, and she's a twin sister, and both of them were bulimic.
Right.
And when the dad came home, they would have to go to the church. They'd have to sit there and listen to their dad preach, and the mother greet everybody. But the mom knew the dad was abusive,
Right.
but the mother was afraid of what everyone else would think.
Right.
So she never defended the children. So the children felt completely unprotected by the mother. The
Right.
mother was codependent on the preacher husband. And these kids had a severe, talk about lack of self-love,
Right.
and ended up feeling out of control and powerless and tried to fit in and be perfect, began sexual relations way too early.
Right.
My client ended up having a child very, very early, which shamed the whole family, the whole preacher family.
Right.
And when she contacted me, she was severely bulimic, but understood that it had something to do with having a narcissist and a codependent for parents.
Right. And that's a great example of how being raised by a narcissist is so destructive. But we're both noticing the same thing, that if you're raised by what I would call your garden variety narcissist, your typical manifestation of narcissistic personality disorder, versus the covert narcissist, it seems to me, and what I'm hearing from you, is that the psychological damage caused is more severe, because you're dealing with the sociopathic elements of the disorder, the secretiveness, the almost like a split personality. So if you're a child and you're just raised by a narcissist, I mean, that's trauma in itself.
Yeah.
That affects development of our self-esteem and our ability to even love and care for ourselves. But if you're raised by a narcissist who you see as nicer to everyone else except to his family, then the message is you're even more worthless than...
For me, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
What I notice is that with my clients is that there's this severe deficit between the inner and the outer reality.
Right.
The inner reality doesn't match the outer reality. Daddy's a preacher, so mentally he should be a nice guy. But emotionally I don't feel like he is. I should love him, everyone loves him, but I don't. So there's this severe conflict between the inner reality and the outer reality. And the fact that I think it creates so much confusion. And I think that's where a lot of dissociation comes from. Because the child can't trust her internal experience of what's happening. Nothing feels real. Nothing is tangible. And there's no one validating the internal experience of the child. If anything, they're being told that their reality is unjustified, that they have no right to that reality. It's horrible.
You know what's really cool about you, Lisa, is that you get this problem on such an accurate and deep level, where people with a master's degree and PhDs don't. And it proves that an education or all the letters behind your name doesn't make you a healer or an effective therapist. So,
I really appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you because you're a smart man.
no, I have all the letters and have more
You got a lot of
and more debt. But you said something that really fascinated me, and I speak about it too. And I love the way you talked about disassociation. Is during early childhood when children are supposed to attach with their parents, if they are raised in an environment that lacks safety, love, and caring, lacks the basics that can help them feel like they're a good person, they have to figure out a way to survive this traumatic environment. And the child who's going to become codependent learns that they're only safe when they focus on other people and learn to be there for their parents. And they start this, what I think John Bradshaw said, this personality type of the human doer, the invisible person, the one that is only lovable when she or he can take care of others. And I think that's the moment of disassociation you're talking about, where you have to disconnect from the fact that you're not lovable for who you really are, because that's really, really painful. And I'm so glad that you connect to that with the work with your clients, because I think that's ground zero of our codependence, that they come to us and they don't know why they keep making these same mistakes. And especially when it's a covert narcissist. Talk about confusing. Oh my gosh.
So confusing. I feel in my own experience, because it was so painful, and people ask me, how do you remember so much from your childhood?
Right.
Because it was so heavy. It's hard, it's hard to forget. I remember going to, and I talk about this in the Road Back to Me,
Right.
where this huge disconnect between my mother and I wanted more than anything to heal it. And 9 years old, going to the card store and wanting to buy her a card, some mushy card, to try to get her to understand that I loved her. And then the moment I put the card back, because I heard my mind say, "You're bad. Bad kids like you don't do this." And I put the card back.
Right.
And I remember exactly where I was, the moment in time where that thought came over me, where it was programmed into my mind that I was bad. But for me, I think that I started to disassociate because I had so much anxiety in my body because I wasn't able to fit in. No matter how I tried, I had so much anxiety. And I think that, I used to pull hair out of my head and I used to count. And I think those were my ways of coping with this tremendous anxiety of just trying to gain my mother and father's validation and just always being aware that I was not getting it. And I don't know how you feel about that.
Oh, I could listen to you all day because I love the way you explain it. Because not only did you experience it, but you know it well enough to teach others. And disassociation in its different forms, I think, is a heart and soul of codependency or self-love deficit disorder treatment or healing or coaching, because our folks that see us, they don't even know they're disconnected, because they disconnected early on to survive, and they don't have a clue. They're oblivious to it.
Yeah. And how dare you, as their child, want something more from them? How dare you, as their child, not be happy with what they're giving you?
And that's the message. And I love when you said it. It's like it was a tape in your head.
Yes.
Codependents, even recovering codependents, they hear that tape in their head that you're selfish, or you're ungrateful, or you're needy, and they misidentify that tape as their own voice. But it's the voice of that narcissistic parent early on, telling them that whenever you want something, you're bad, because it makes the narcissist feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think children are sponges. They're in a theta brainwave state until they're about 8 years old. So they're hypnotic. So whatever message they receive from their environment, they're perceiving that, and that's getting downloaded. So if mommy gets annoyed because you say you're hungry, then the message is, you're not worthy to be fed. Your needs just don't matter. And children feel that.
And what you're talking about from a clinical point of view is you're talking about attachment theory, that children, humans, including primates, we are wired, we have evolved to need attachment in order to develop psychological and social skill sets. And when there's an absence of attachment, negligence, deprivation, or abuse, it changes the way that we perceive the world and eventually treat ourselves and others. And when the world is hostile and your parents who are supposed to take care of you feel dangerous, you survive this lack of attachment experience by shutting down, and that's the disassociation you're talking about. I mean,
Absolutely.
how could you grow up thinking you're a horrible child? No, you think about, I'm a good child when I take care of everyone else. Did you struggle?
Absolutely.
Did you struggle with that in your codependency recovery?
Later on, when I was a child, I just felt bad. I felt neglected. I felt like I was in my mother's way. My mother was a rager,
Well,
you know. I mean, I wanted so desperately to connect with her and let her know I loved her. I wrote her poems, but it was never quite enough. Later on, you know, when I was about 15, I became very boy crazy.
Right.
And that's when I believe that I developed the I need to please you so that you can see me. That's where that started. But when I was young, I felt bad. I just felt really worthless as a child. Suicidal at 12. You know, I had my dad's pistol to my head at 12 years old. I wanted to die. Oh yeah, I was humiliated very badly in school one day when I was 12, and I thought, there's no reason to live. It's bad at home, it's bad at school. I don't think I can suffer this pain one more day. And it was bad. And so, but after like about 15, my first boyfriend, that's when I really saw my codependency. Now looking back.
So what you're talking about is, and by the way, thank you for sharing that, because you know your story, our story, helps people realize they're not alone, and gives them permission to talk about their own. In fact, getting back to the theme of this discussion, disassociation, is that you didn't disassociate. Not all codependents disassociate. You walked around with this reservoir, this pool of pain, so much so that you contemplated ending your life. But there are this whole other group of codependents who disconnect and see the world as this half-filled cup, this rosy, the rose-colored glasses type of view of the world. And when you start getting them to talk about their background, they start to tell stories like the one you just said.
Yeah.
And they disconnected. And I'm saying to everyone that's listening to us is that if you have a story, it needs to be told. And even if you don't know it, trust someone like Lisa, someone like me, or a therapist out there that you can safely open up that closet and look at what really happened to you and reconnect or reassociate with your own reality.
Yeah.
What's your advice to people that might be listening to this and feel a connection to what we're saying?
Well, the first thing that came to mind was like, you know, we represent hope. Codependents oftentimes don't feel hopeful. They might be, just this past week, I got at least 3 or 4 emails from women who were in their 60s, one was in her 70s, that it was because they went on YouTube and they heard something that I said or you said, someone like you said, that made them realize, oh my God, now I know what's wrong with me.
Right.
And you represent the fact that you can heal from this.
Right.
So the first thing I would say is that, yeah, it's bad, but it's really, really great on the other side once you understand what's wrong. And you and I both represent the fact that healing is possible. So that in and of itself is huge, because a lot of people don't think that it is. But I agree also, I didn't become a psychotherapist, although sometimes I wish I did. But when I was recovering, what I did, a little bit of background, was I figured out what a child was supposed to receive. And then side by side, I figured out what I didn't receive. And then I began to give myself what I never received. Right. And so when I began to journal, and like you said, I began to become reacquainted with these experiences, I understood that I had to find a way to tap into the emotions that were lost,
Right.
tap into the emotions that were invalidated, that I was shamed and I wasn't allowed to have. I had to give myself space and time to allow myself to psychologically connect what was happening in me emotionally or that I suppressed. And I gave myself space. And if it meant that I had to spend 3 hours crying in the bathtub, then that's what it meant. But I had to find a way to connect to those emotions so that I can make them real, so that I can feel valid.
And your experience runs very much. It parallels my experience as a therapist, and I help people understand that their lack of self-love, their horrible feelings about themselves, the shame, the guilt, the self-hate that they carry, is rooted in what happened to them when they were a child. And I open up the doors to understanding and remembering one little bit at a time what actually happened, so they can reconcile the reality of it. Because when we disassociate, we block the painful memories from our consciousness as a way to survive. It's a defense mechanism.
Absolutely.
And in your case, you were, I know this sounds kind of paradoxical, but you were healthy enough to be able to manage it, although very, very impaired as a child. But there are some people that are so disconnected or disassociated that we have to find a path to remember their experience so that they can embrace what happened and incorporate that into their own reality so that they can see that they were a victim. And that's really the essence of what I call the codependency cure, which is a video that I did, a 6-hour seminar video, and a book that I'm writing. But what I'd like to do is I want to wrap this up because we're going to do more videos together. But I really appreciated the opportunity to talk about disassociation as a really important element of codependency or self-love deficit disorder treatment.
I agree.
Any thoughts that you have to close it all up?
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to say before we close is that it's okay to be angry at your parents. A lot of us have been conditioned to think that we need to honor our mother and father. And there's a lot of fear surrounding just confronting, even in your own head, that my mother and father screwed up. And I think that it's really important that what we do is we help validate people's childhood experiences as being traumatic, even though the people in their life program them to believe it was no big deal.
Well, I'm gonna take what you said and just add another element to it. We help them acknowledge how they feel is real.
Yeah, valid.
Because they've learned to discount their own experience, their own interpretation, in favor of the other person that hurt them. So they can realize that they're walking around they're a walking wounded.
Yeah, and it's scary, and that's why we talk about the courage being such a big issue, because, when you realize how abused you've been, that messes with your memories. That messes with your reality. That messes with Christmas. That messes with Easter. That messes with the next birthday. How do I deal with this?
Well, it distorts it by the conscious memories of thinking you're fundamentally broken or damaged, or it takes the memories away and you've disassociated or disconnected. Well, it seems like we can talk about this for hours, but we're gonna wrap this up. But I just wanted to mention once more that we're having on February 13th our first webinar. It's going to be a 3-hour webinar. It's called Banishing Fear: Finding Courage to Heal from Codependency or Self-Love Deficit Disorder. I'm very excited about it. Yeah. Send us your email address so we can put you on our mailing list. Email us at info@advancedclinicaltrainers.com. Thank you, Lisa. It's been great. And I look forward to our next video together on YouTube.
Awesome. Namaste.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.